We're starting now? Okay, good. We're on.
We're on. We've been on all this time?
Yeah, because this is telling us how long this show is going to be. And now that we have your story out of the way, thank God we were off the air, because we have a gentleman here who's only got so much time to tell lots of stories.
The only guy that knows that has that problem is Jay Clark.
Yep.
Oh, he's our guest today.
There he is.
Here I am.
Hi,
Hey,
Jay.
how you doing?
How you doing? I'm doing quite well. How about yourself?
Good. So, Jay, how did it all start for you in this wonderful, crazy business of broadcasting?
Started when I was probably about 4.
Really?
And I was sick. You know, we didn't have a lot of money. I lived in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. So we decided to, go to the doctor, I guess. And I went to the doctor, and it was snowing, and we didn't have a car. So we walked up to North Street, which is about a half mile. And then coming back, we're standing out in front of the bus station because we're thinking, okay, it's too cold for the 4-year-old who has a definite cold to be standing here. And across Park Square came a guy running, and his name was Dan Healy. And Dan Healy was the morning guy at WBRK in Pittsfield. And he saw us standing there, and he said, you know, it's silly. You can see the bus. Why don't you come up? I'm the only guy at the radio station. And so I went up. And that was kind of the start of my interest in radio.
Wow.
And then my parents, also WBRK, they used to have an organ show, a guy with an organ, right? And it was at the Sheraton Hotel. And I guess I must have been about 8 at this time. And the guy's name was Al Forrest. And Al Forrest, they couldn't get a babysitter, so they brought me to this club. And Al Forrest said, hey, you know, why don't you have him come over to the organ and he can start the show? And so I did, and he told me where to punch my finger, and I started the Al Forrest show. And from that point on, I was pretty interested in the business.
You're hooked.
To say the least.
And
that's why I started, by the way, WBRK in Pittsfield.
Wow.
So now, how old were you when you actually started at BRK in Pittsfield?
16.
16. Unbelievable. Gosh. Now, did you ever have a plan B if the radio thing didn't work out? What would you have done if you weren't doing radio?
Oh, actually, at that point and through my early 20s, I really wanted to become a studio drummer.
Mm-hmm.
And was good enough to do that. But my parents didn't want me to move to New York because they were afraid of it. You know, they grew up in Pittsfield. They didn't know anything about the big city. And somebody came back from there, and he had been molested or attacked or something. And so, oh, no, you can't go to New York, no matter what. And so I didn't become a studio drummer. I played professionally for a long time. But as it turned out, I ended up working at WBRK part-time, and then ended up going full-time at WSBS. Quit college to do that, and that's maybe not one of the smartest things I ever did. But at WSBS was a daytimer in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and I was full-time there. And somewhere along the line, I figured, okay, I can't be a studio drummer because I can't make enough money, you know, and I'm at that point I'm married. So I started sending out tapes, which is what we did. And I can remember I sent them to the stations that I wanted to be at, which were the ones I could hear in Pittsfield. So I sent to Springfield because this band I was in had played in Springfield. And I sent to Albany. And WTRY was my favorite station. And I kept sending, and they wanted me to be a news guy. And I said, no. And I said no because, as we discussed a little earlier, I have dyslexia. I didn't know it at the time. In fact, what they said was I was a talented, dumb kid in school. In fact, one of the teachers said I was dumb as a fence post. You know, which
Here's motivation for you.
Yeah, pretty dumb. No doubt about that. So anyway, I turned them down, and I got Rick Snyder, who was a really good announcer, took the job as a news guy I'm out playing drums. I had, probably about 3 scotches in me when I got home, and turned on the radio, and here's Rick Snyder uh, doing a music show, and I just lost it. I
Mm-hmm.
thought for sure that was the end of my dream.
Mm-hmm.
How could I do that? And this is something for somebody who wants to get into any business, you just don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kept bugging Lee Gray, who was the program director at that point. And one day he calls up and he says, "Look, this is I got something for you. We're going to go all night, and because we want to go against the WGY, which was the 50,000-watt flamethrower in Schenectady, Albany, Schenectady, Troy, and we think we can beat them in news." And I said, "Well, I can't do news." "No, no, no, you don't understand. You're doing a disc jockey show, and you have a newsman, Wayne Fuller. And, this wouldn't happen today just because of budgets. But I took the job, was there overnight, and they had bus boards, and we didn't have TV ads, but we were in the newspaper, and they were just advertising this great Jay Clark show. And that was really the start of my career, because that was the start of professional radio. The other interesting thing is I put together a plan. What stations would I go to? And the idea was I would go to WTRY, I named the call letters. Then I'd go to WBZ in Boston because I could hear them. They had WBZA in Springfield at that point in time, and I could hear them. And then from there, when I couldn't be a disc jockey anymore, I'd become a program director at WPRO. Well, I ended up becoming the program director at WTRY because I outlasted everybody. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call from Al Herskovitz saying, "Hey, you want to come to Providence?" And I had to make a career choice at that point, because did I want to be on the air? Because I was still on the air at TRY, but I was a program guy. Or did I want to be a program director? And I realized that I couldn't read copy. And at that point in time, I'd memorize all the copy. And so what I did was I looked at myself in the mirror with a chalk thing and made lines. Where do you want to be? Where are you? And would you hire you as a program director? Would you hire you in New York City? And I said no to myself. So I took the PRO job, which now took my career into management and programming. So that's how it all happened.
Wow. Yeah. I know what it means to your dyslexia. Is
Dyslexic.
Yeah. And
Here, you can read it right. Oh, you can't read
I can't
it.
really
anymore.
read it because I think I have it. And because I would read a newscast and I would either pronounce the word wrong, because I think it's a different word, because the spelling looked different to me at the time. And that's why I always stayed out of news. I couldn't do a newscast, though my early starting in the business, that's what I did. I did newscasts, and when I worked at CO in Waterbury, I did newscasts. When I worked at WLAE, I did a newscast. And
That was the problem I had was with the when they do the teleprompter after I got out of radio and I did some time in TV, did some time. But I realized that, first of all, I can't take direction constantly through my earpiece, through the IFB. Constantly, every 30 seconds while I was on the camera, they would tell me what to do. And no matter what, the cameras just messed me up too much because of the fact, turn here, turn there, and then they're talking to me in my head. And I'm like, this is, then they had the teleprompter. And the script was lousy. So what they would do was they'd run it, and I'd start talking about nothing that was on the teleprompter. And they go, "Steve, if you're going to go away from the teleprompter, you need to tell us, because the guy running the teleprompter is and eventually I really quit. And I said, I can't help it. I said, I'm a radio guy, because I originally went there to be a booth announcer. I said, I'm radio. This is, I can't do this. But Jay, I got to ask you, at what point in time did you first get married? And how did that go along with your career when you first started that way?
Well, I was at WBRK, and this was my high school sweetheart.
Yeah, yeah.
So probably 64, we actually tied the knot.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm working in radio and still playing drums and teaching drums and,
Wow.
and doing all of that stuff.
Virtually never home, right?
No, so the marriage worked well.
That's when he got home.
And it's when I started being home. Yeah. Anyway, so that's how that worked. And then she became pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
and we had our first daughter, who I live with now.
Yep, yep.
It's kind of cool. I live with her and her husband
Mm-hmm.
in wonderful Harleysville, Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of new for me. But and it's been really a very, very good life. And she, give her credit, she was willing to go along with all the hijinks that
Uh,
went along with, excuse me, radio and music.
mm-hmm.
But and then she moved. I mean, she moved with me when I was in Albany. She lived in Albany. When I was in Providence, she lived in Providence. And Dave, I have a question for you. How is your spelling? Do you spell well?
Oh, I spelled Spelingeg. I spell it great. Terrible.
I can't spell.
I
And so
can't.
the problem with the news thing is I couldn't read my own copy. And that was
How'd you guys get through school if you weren't? How did you know? When you had to have reading assignments and all this stuff. How did you get through school?
well, I stayed back 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
third grade, and then they wanted to put me into shop, and my mother refused to have that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, no, he's got to go into college prep. He's too smart. And
Yep.
well, if he is, then he's not showing it. So that was the first time. And the second time was my senior year. And they held me back because I couldn't spell.
Mm-hmm.
I was held back in the 6th grade, and but part of it I was clowning around too. I was the class clown, and but the teachers always said, well, if he put his mind to it, he could definitely do it, and but
Yep. Should try harder. Could try it harder. Yeah, I got a lot of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you didn't stay back, as we used to call it.
Oh,
back
yes, I
then.
did.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Oh.
Kindergarten, straight out of the box. I was throwing back right there.
How do you
I could
flunk?
believe that.
How do you flunk kindergarten?
As a sandbag issue, I don't know. No, what it really was I had just turned 5 at the end of the summer. And fortunately or unfortunately, twice that year I had to go in for surgery. And because of the loss of time back then, now they're not as concerned about that because kids going into kindergarten are already a year or two ahead of where we were. So, it was just like, but, that's there was a reason for all of it. But Jay, when you were able to do that and have a family, had you made the transition yet from being on the air to being more stable? If you can't be in the programming world, was that because I would imagine trying to have a family, strictly pulling a shift would have been tough to do.
Well, no, I think pulling the shift was pretty easy.
But I mean,
And
from
I
a pay,
wasn't
from a
around
pay,
whole lot.
I just meant from a pay standpoint.
Oh, from a pay
Yeah,
standpoint?
yeah.
Let's see, I think I was making probably at BRK, I was part-time, so let's go to SBS.
Uh-huh.
At SBS, I think I was making $65 or something like that.
Wow.
Well, but drumming, playing gigs, I was doing quite well.
Okay.
And when I got to Albany, Schenectady, Troy, then I was making 100 maybe. And the thing is that I made way more as with personal appearances.
Mhm.
Because what happened is I'd been there. I stayed there about 6, 7 years, and went from the all night show to days, and then I did a freeform show. And the freeform show just caught on big time. It was 10 to 1 or 10 to 2. And, I knew music, and I'd become the music director. And so they let me pretty much do whatever I wanted to do. And at that point in time, we were kind of picking the hits, so to speak. And besides that, I got to know my audience very well because they called. And we did a lot of personal appearances just for advertising, like your dad, for example. You'd go out to Zayre's and be there, and the crowd would be there, and life would be good. And the program director at TRY, because I was shy, just like everybody in this business is. And I was really upset my first personal appearance. And he came to me afterward because he was there. And he said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Nobody came to talk to me. I was there, and they came in, obviously, and everybody was happy. But, and he said, no, you're the star. They're the audience, and they're afraid to talk to you. They don't want to come up to talk to you because they want to, but they're afraid to." And he taught me that I had to be outgoing. Now, I still, in crowds, am not terribly outgoing, but behind a drum set, I always was. And so I was able to transfer that to, okay, we love you. I'm acting now, and I'm Jay Clark, as opposed to my real name, Joseph LaPlante.
Now, so but I mean, Jay, I mean, your career, you went on to be one of the biggest guys in the business and running a lot of radio stations as you excelled in the larger markets and then in consulting and doing everything. So how were you able to kind of keep it all together? How were you so fortunate? Did you make most of these moves or on your own, or were they told, that's it and you were lucky? I mean, how did that go?
No, it was all luck.
Really?
And I was thinking about that because I do a post. I try to do it once a week. With my eyes, I've missed a couple of weeks now. But if I take a look at my career, the TRY thing I had to work really hard for. But then the same day, I get a call from WGY wanting to know if I want to be the morning guy there. And that evening, I get a call from Herskovitz for PRO to be the program director. And as I started to say, I made that decision because that was where I had to go. But now I'm at PRO and I'm there for a long time and having a great time. And I get a call about WTIC in Hartford, and they called me. And so now I'm at TIC in Hartford, working for a lot of people that both of you know. And that was working out. Mike Joseph had hot hits, and so that format, I wasn't really allowed to touch it very much, just make sure it worked the way Mike Joseph wanted it to work. And the AM needed to be upgraded, I guess. It's hard to say because it was such a great radio station, but they wanted to contemporize it, I guess, bring the demos down a little bit. And so I'm there. And all of a sudden, I come back after lunch, and my assistant, Joni Lincoln, who's just a wonderful person,
Joni, yeah.
said, "There's this guy on the phone. His name is Rick Sklar." Now, Rick Sklar, for those of you who don't know, was probably one of the great radio programmers of all time. And he kept WABC on top for years and years and years. They finally had been beaten, but that wasn't why he called. We had put a talk show on at night on WTIC.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike Miller, I think, was the guy who was the talk show
Yeah,
host.
was that Mike Line back then?
I think so, yes.
Well, Mike Line was during the daytime when I worked there.
No, okay. I can't remember what the name was. All I know is it was a night show. And Ella Grasso was the governor, and she was on a lot, and she had her own show once a month with Mike, and apparently Sklar had been looking at the numbers and said, "Oh my goodness, this guy really knows a lot about talk." I didn't know anything about talk. I hired.
You were
Mike,
there,
and I said, "Yeah," and I said, "Mike, I'll tell you what. I'll make a deal with you. You teach me about talk because I think it's important. I know, and I'll teach you about formats." And we did. That's what happened. So anyway, I get in, and I'm thinking that this guy Rick Sklar is not really Rick Sklar. I'm thinking it's a good friend of mine. Yeah, sure. Yeah, no. Who are you? I'm Rick Sklar. Well, okay, Mr. Sklar. Who are you really? No, I really am Rick Sklar, a president of programming for ABC. Okay. And they wanted me to go to Detroit because they had a talk station there. And, I asked him, I can't believe I did this, but I just asked him, I said, well, okay, how much does it pay? And I knew I was getting a raise, I think in about 3 weeks. And I'd be making exactly what they were offering me to go to Detroit at WTIC AM and FM. And so I said, well, Rick, I appreciate it, but why would I go to Detroit with an inferior signal and more expenses, because Detroit's a bigger city, it's going to cost me more, when I have a 50,000 watt flame blower here that just absolutely positively is killing in the ratings, and an FM that's coming up strong, and I can stay here and I'm comfortable and it's a great place to work. Wow, okay. I said, thanks a lot, but no. About 3 weeks later, I get a call from him again, and he says, "Well, would you at least get on an airplane and go to a little city called Los Angeles
Oh my God.
and talk about being a program director of a station called KABC? Would you do that?"
Wow.
And I said, "Well, yeah." But I went there, and George Green was the general manager, and he didn't want a programmer. And at that point, man, I was full of myself. I just, wow, okay, this is what's going to happen. Ask some of the older management at TIC, and so I looked at him and I said, "Look, I'll be here for about 2 months, and then we're going to get into a big fight, and you're going to fire me, or I'm going to quit. It's just not going to work." And he said, "Okay, I understand that." And I left and came back. And about 2 weeks later, the program director of WABC quit. And so I called Sklar and I said, "You don't know very much about me except that I can do talk, but my background is all music, and I'd be willing to take that one on because it's going to be hard. You got FM coming up, and you want to bring the radio station back to #1." But the next day, I was there the next day, and they hired me.
Wow.
It was amazing. And then one of the guys that worked for me, uh, I think in Providence, but I'm not sure. But we're in the men's room. The general manager and I are in the men's room, because we had a long meeting. And I hear from one of the little caves, "Is that Jay Clark?" And I had to swear him to secrecy.
Oh my God.
But that's how that happened.
And there
And
you
that-
were, and they heard.
Kept happening that way. And once I got to WABC, then kind of the world wanted me, no matter what, even though I was the most hated man in New York City.
Why were you the most hated man? Was that because of what you had done and what you accomplished with the station?
Yes, I took the radio station from music to talk. And it didn't go quite the way I wanted it to because there was a lot of interference corporately, but that's what we did. And I had research that said it would take them 10 years to make a cent.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what it did. It took them 10 years after I left.
So now, when you've been at a station like to the top in New York like that, and of course the small time you spent in L.A., did you finally say, "Okay, that's it," and go into doing your own thing, or where did you go from there?
No, I actually went from WABC to Cleveland, and that was really weird. It was the country station in Cleveland. They had an AM and FM, and the general manager, Harold Hinson was the guy's name. He wanted to do a very strange format, which had, it was kind of information in the morning, talk middays, music AC in the afternoon, and jazz at night. And the person that was doing jazz had never heard jazz before. She was a country announcer. So it was like, "Well, Harold, this isn't going to work." And his favorite thing is he'd get really close and he had really thick glasses. And he'd say, "Son, you're right, but you're wrong." And so I tried to do it, and it was a disaster. But from there, I moved on to Los Angeles to K-Hits and KLSX. From there, back to Detroit. Now, that's the first time that I was ever let go, was in, well, actually, yeah, it really was the first time I was ever let go. And it was a guy by the name of Bobby Moore. And, we just didn't see eye to eye and something. And that happens. And that you both are of an age that would understand that, normally the normal lifespan for a programmer at that point in time at a major station, and God bless the guy just coming in after me, because he was able to survive for a long time. But normally it was about maybe 6 years, and I think that that's probably what mine was about 6, 7 years, depending on where I was. So we did K hits, which was great. And then from there, I went to Detroit, WOMC, which was AC, and then walked across the street to WLLZ, which is Wheels, which was a great experience. Boy, I'll tell you, that radio station went from nowhere. It was #1 in the marketplace, and they really didn't. It had gone downhill because there were two other rock stations in town. And I was able to, lucky enough to, they had two consultants. One of those consultants was a guy who was working for, I think, Greater Media at the time in New York, at the rock station in New York, ORFM, I think it was. And the others were in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, our music director played every once in a while with Seeger, and he had been in the market for a long time. So I'm listening to the music and I'm saying, why are we doing this? What are the big hits in this marketplace? And this guy, I got rid of the guy in New York, took the guys from Los Angeles and said, okay, now you give me the biggest hits in the country. And what we're going to do is mix them so that this radio station is Detroit's Wheels again. And we did. It was a hard, rockin', great radio station. From there, I bounced around a little bit, ended up in Orlando at WTKS, where we did Young Talk. And
Now, what was Young Talk?
Male Talk. It was we probably couldn't have gotten away with it anywhere in the United States except Orlando. Orlando is a very interesting place because, and I loved Orlando, I still do, because it was corporate. It had a huge gay population. It had a huge redneck population. And I was able to identify, well, first of all, the afternoon drive guy they got from the news station, Jim Phillips was his name, really, really, really good. And we put Howard Stern on in the morning. I had Russ Bowe and Dirty Jim on at night. I will tell you a quick story. They had a sex talk show on at night when I came there. And the reason they wanted to hire a programmer to be in-house is because the sex talk people, these people didn't know anything about radio except Phillips, really. And so she comes on, and her topic for the night, hi, this is Aaron. And that's the kind of voice she had, right? And tonight's topic is, do you spit or do you swallow? And I went, so obviously they were a little upset about that. They decided they needed somebody who knew something about the business. And it was owned by Press Broadcasting. They had a TV station there also. And the general manager, they brought in the grandson of the actual owner, the guy who started Press. And he was really smart and had graduated from business school. And I'll never forget, that's the first question. He said, would you allow that on the air? And I said, no.
Good answer.
No, I don't think so. He said, okay, well, we got to fix that. And the first thing, there are two things I want from you, because I have to run the TV station. I can't really run the radio station. So, okay. And I'm paying you more than anybody in Orlando is being paid. I don't know if that's true or not, but I bought it. And he said, he said two things. One, I want to be number 8, 25 to 54, or 18 to 34. And number 7, I guess, no, 18 to 34 is 7. And then you can't lose the license. So those are the two things.
Little things like that.
Now, I can tell you that we turned that station around in about a year and a half to number 1 in all demos. All, no, except women 35 plus, and we were number 2 there. Talk station played music in the afternoon, or in weekends, on weekends, and it just worked out. Walter Sabo was the consultant there. The guy is a genius. I mean, that was a great format, worked extremely well. I ended up back at K-Hits again in Los Angeles for a little while. That was a mistake because guy let me go again.
Back again, gone again.
One thing,
His assistant said, I never want to see you again, ever.
that's one thing in this business. If you haven't, especially if you're an on-air personality, if you haven't been fired, you haven't really worked this business. And in my end, I've been on the air. I never was fired while I was on the air. But when I got more involved in the engineering and production, that's when DRC said, see ya. And then I went over to ESPN and stayed there 30 years. And they retired me at ESPN because they thought I was too old, so.
Yeah, those things happen. And one of the things when I left Sirius, and I really regret doing that. I left Sirius because I wanted to sail. I got into sailing, and I owned a sailboat. We built a boat in Brazil, as a matter of fact, 46-foot catamaran that I lived on in New York Harbor, and it was great. But I was getting a little older, and so and was divorced by then. And so, and the lady I was living with, and we had a child, didn't want to come to New York. She was afraid of New York. She's a Florida gal. And my dad had retired, I think, at 65 or 68, something like that. So I said, okay, I can do that. I'll retire at 65 or 68. And I did. I remember Mel Karmazin saying, are you sure you want to do this? You sure? And yeah, I'm sure. No, it was a mistake. I probably shouldn't have. I loved New York. I loved doing what I was doing.
Oh, living on a boat in the harbor in New York City, that's got to be great.
I mean,
Yeah,
you had the energy. I lived in New York for 6 months while I was going to broadcast school, and I worked for Channel 5, WNEW TV, and I was in guest relations, and but you could feel the energy in the city, and that was exciting.
Electric.
Very electric.
Yeah, I can tell you that I'd get off an airplane after, putting a studio together or something for Sirius, and I was just, here I am, I'm home, this is it. This is where I want to be. But as it turned out, nobody wanted to really go sailing. My game plan was, okay, I'm going to quit and then I'm going to go sailing. And I'm figuring I could sail for a couple of years and then I could get back into the business, no problem. And that's not true. All of a sudden, I'm now in my late 60s, early 70s, and I did some consulting, and I did some kind of interesting startups, but and nobody in the business really wanted to hire me. And in fairness, the business was moving and changing. I think, and Dave, you'll probably understand this. I think that I didn't know enough about cell phones, smartphones, etc., to really do what had to happen for that next step. And could have I learned it? Yeah, I have learned a lot. I mean, here we are. But but that's not really what I think they all wanted or needed. So I consulted for quite a while, and then the guy I was consulting for my main gig was down in Sebring, Florida, and so I went down there and programmed for a couple of years, and
Multiple radio stations down there, right?
yeah, we had 5.
Wow.
And but the staff was too small, and frankly, there wasn't enough money to do what I knew had to be done, and nobody wanted to take the risk. And I've interestingly enough, and I'm doing this whole thing now, the Wild West of radio, on these podcasts, and I can tell you that I look at my career, and most of my career were almost startups or complete format changes. And I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like the idea of being able to work with younger people. And unfortunately in Sebring, there aren't a lot of younger people to work with.
I know.
They're all good, but I ended up not being able to really program. And in the meantime, I had to take over the engineering department. Dave, you'll like that. I know nothing about engineering, but have always been able to talk with engineers, and sometimes that's difficult. And so I ended up having to do that. And our consulting engineer passed away. They had 2 guys before that, so the place was all wired. Oh my God, you'd throw up looking at the wiring. And so I hired another consulting engineer. I hired one of our part-timers, really wanted to get into new media. And so he took over our computers and satellite dishes. And that was all working okay, but it just wasn't fun. And so I said, why do this?
It's not fun anymore. That's it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So here I am living in Nueva Harleysville and talking to you guys.
See what's happened. Who would imagine we'd get to that point where now we're finally on television and we're doing radio talk. Now the next thing is going to be we'll be on the radio and we'll be doing
Television
talk.
Television talk.
Sooner or later we'll get it right. Just one, and I know this is just, it drives Dave crazy, but just one quick thing. And I know I can't possibly say quick, but you at some point believed enough in the beginning of satellite radio with Sirius and now Sirius XM and all that, just because I know we got to run, but how did you have it within you to say there's something happening there and I'm going to move into that?
I took a look at it, and I'd driven across the country 2 or 3 times because I like to drive, and realized that would be a way of being able to be heard throughout, because there wasn't this any longer. There wasn't new media at that point in time, and I actually interviewed for XM first, and Lee Abrams got the job. I think I was runner-up, second runner-up, third runner-up. And then again, Walt Sabo called me one day and said, "Jay, you have to come to New York tomorrow because we have a big deal." And I said, "I can't. I have a contract." He said, "Do you love me?" "Yeah." "Yeah. I'll be there." And that's when I went over to Sirius, because I just believed in that. The other thing I liked was the fact that you could broadcast to indigenous people, like Canada, for example. We did a whole thing up there before we sold that part of the business. So, you could help people. And that's always been the reason I got into the business. And entertainment, and this is my core belief. My core, and it came when I was playing drums. And I could see that when I was playing drums, and no matter what the group was, people were having a good time. And they were forgetting their trouble. And then when I got on the air and people started calling me, or I'd see them at personal appearances, it was the same thing. And, you have to, that's my mission in life. If I can help people get through their trouble, and make them feel just a little bit better. The best promotion I ever did was at PRO, which was you. We had a jingle package called Just for You, and it was a friend. You know, we want to be your friend, and everything we do is for you. And what is a friend? And we went through that whole thing. A friend is somebody you like being with, somebody who can keep it in, a conversation with. You can be entertained, you can be informed, but most of all, we're there when you're in time of trouble. And boy, did that work in Providence. And that came from Steve. That came from your dad. I mean, that whole idea. Your dad was very, very instrumental in the way I approached radio. And in doing this, I've also learned that probably my most creative parts, with the exception of Sirius, were in the media markets. Because once you get into the major markets, then a lot of it's coming down to you from above.
Yeah, yeah.
And then somewhere the influence of the program director changed to the influence of the general manager and then corporate. And that was, I was just lucky. It was a good time to be in, because programmers were the most important people in the station.
And now what happens? They
How
have,
much power I had, I wouldn't have given in on some of the stuff we did at WABC. I would have just said no.
yeah. Then general managers come in the bigger markets, and they take all the fun out of it. Let's take the fun out of it, make more money, and get higher ratings.
Well, that's
Go
the one
figure.
thing your dad was very good on the F word, on the F. Started out with fun radio and
Yeah.
then had the
Friend.
Friends
Yeah,
package.
yeah,
and
yeah.
that, I mean, it made it exciting.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I was thrilled to be 8 years at DRC, and
yeah.
especially in my years of doing production there. I mean, unleashed my creativity, and then along with your dad,
Well, it was the same way, and I know it was the same way. He always, when the DJs and everything would worry about their ratings, and he would say, "No, you don't worry about the ratings." He says, "My job is to worry about the ratings." He says, "Your job is if they tuned into the frequency tomorrow and we weren't there, would anybody care that we were gone?" And that was it. I remember talking to Arnie Chase, from where you were with him over at TIC. You trained Arnie Chase. And when he said, growing up, he said, you have no idea what the influence was of WDRC. He says, when my babysitter brought a transistor radio into my house when I was about 10 years old, that's what turned my life around. And he said, if that hadn't happened, he said, I probably never would have programmed TIC FM. There never would have been a TIC television. But he did say, we had great announcers at TIC. He says, but DRC was family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying. Make a friend, make a family. That was
You
it.
hug them and you love them. And the other thing that, again, I mentioned earlier, and Dave, you would like this. I can tell you that you would have loved working at Sirius in the early years in particular.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was the Wild West, but their engineering department was just incredible. I mean, there was never a wire out of place. They were constantly changing because you have just this much bandwidth. And we had we started with 96, I think, stations. And then, slowly but surely, the bandwidth, it didn't expand. They were just able to put more stations in there and thin the sound out for each station, and then we started looking at which stations we're listening to and which ones weren't, and those got a little bit more bandwidth. But they spent a lot of time on the sound, and not only that, but the way the place was put together. And everything was documented. Everything.
Yeah, we had my favorite station on Sirius was it was the 60s music. I liked the oldies 60s music and the 70s. But 148, the old time radio shows.
Yeah.
That was my favorite. I love listening to them. I'd be driving from Connecticut to Florida, and the best part about it is you didn't have to change the station because you were heard all the way down. But it was great listening to the classics, The Shadow and Superman and other suspense. But it was great entertainment. It was great entertainment, especially when I was driving overnights back then and listening to these
Oh,
old
I
shows.
remember. Were you there when they tried to do the Playboy station on satellite radio? Was that?
All right.
Jay
There were-
probably.
They used to have two women on there.
Two
They were.
stations just before I left. And I personally programmed. One was the Catholic channel,
Oh wow.
and the other was the Playboy channel. And I figured that no matter what,
That's
go down or
serious,
go
right?
up, I'm going to have somebody who likes me.
Oh yeah, no, that was great. I used to, Bill Rock. I loved to listen to the Elvis channel, and I know you were involved with getting that started with him, and that was just amazing. But I also loved I loved Margaritaville. I loved Jimmy Buffett music, but people would always call up and say, "Why don't you just play only Jimmy Buffett?" And they said, "That's because Jimmy likes to listen to the station." It was you'd focus on that, but there'd be some other artists in there to
By the
go
way,
along with that.
That's the truth. And, I put Jimmy's studio into Orlando.
Oh,
Personally
wow.
did that. And very, very interesting because, boy, is he a business guy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, absolutely positively. There is no BS with that guy. You do this, 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 and this, but he's easy to work with. And that station has done extremely well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really is. And people have said that he's an amazing businessman. He can be.
The Sinatra station's done well,
Oh, great.
And Scott has started putting, you got a Billy Joel station now, you got a bunch of artist stations. And I think that XM actually started doing that kind of thing early on, if I'm not mistaken. Just when we bought them, we just took it over. And by the way, I think I would have ended up in Washington for that transition because they needed somebody out there to do that. And that's kind of what I do, So because Mel wasn't terribly happy I was leaving, but what are you going to do? Here I am.
Yeah, I
Smiling.
think, and I know we're going to go because we actually have, we have Joe McCoy in the wings.
Yes.
So we're going to talk to Joe. But I know, like you said back a few minutes ago, you said that it really came down to if you want it, to stick with it and keep going after it. And I think that's what a lot of, you've worked at the Broadcasting School, the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. It is, average voice, average intelligence, above average ambition. Keep going. But I know it's great to see you're spending some time with family now and everything else. But I got a feeling if somebody was out there going, maybe if we get a hold of Jay Clark, they'll pull you back in.
Probably.
It's hard to say no.
Probably.
Hard to say no.
We're going to see Jay at the radio reunion.
Yep.
And looking forward to that.
Yep, August 16th, 2026 at Farrell's in Portland, Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Yep.
Yeah, all the way in Connecticut.
Yep.
Jay, thank you very much for being a part of this extravaganza, this craziness of our business. And
Well, listen, it's been a wonderful ride for me, for sure. And I wouldn't change it for the world. Even if I did want to be a studio drummer, I'd probably be dead by now.
well, the one thing I noticed when I had talked to places that were thinking of hiring CSB students, they said, well, compare the college student to the CSB student. I said, that's easy. CSB students are hungry. They want the job, and they will put their effort into it, where some college students feel they're owed the job because they have the diploma. And I said, that diploma is worth toilet paper on a wall. I mean, it's how hungry are you willing to do this?
I've got it. Yeah, that's why I like working at Sirius, for example. They were all young,
Yep.
and they all cared, and they all wanted it. I've got a guy who's doing two channels now, and he's a star in Los Angeles. I mean, he's got his own clothes. It's nuts, but that's what you want to do. You want to be able to have people who are hungry and want that.
And that's the way ESPN was in the early days.
Yes.
We had a young crew. We had former NBC engineers and executives coming in, but they all had open minds. And when we were putting the NCAA basketball tournaments together, and what can we do? How can we do that? How can we have this game and that game on at the same time, but yet broadcast both of them? And we had the integration network, and we bounced back and forth from one game to another. But that's the hungriness that
And it's also getting young people, which was the thing with my dad in 1960 when he flipped the station to, basically rock and roll, because he could see those kids were going to be forming. They're going to need a bank. They're going to need cars. They're going to need furniture, and be with them.
But your dad was also open to ideas
Oh yeah,
from them. I mean, I know I collaborated with your dad numerous times
Yep.
on programming and production, and he always listened. Very rarely he didn't say, "Well, that's interesting. That's interesting." Well, let me hear it, and then I put it together. And if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, yeah, I like it. Let's do it.
Well, even at 104, we went from Magic 104, Killing, and then we went to let's pump it up a little bit, Star 104, a little bit more. They flipped that thing to alt when they went alternative rock. And they turned the world they turned the market upside down, because they had done a lot of research in Hartford, and they said next to Seattle that Hartford really was, the strongest that really wanted an alternative. The following day, I mean, that fast. And like you said, Jay, first they pulled out all the microphones. They just relied on the music, and they let the alternative music carry it. Then when they brought people in, kids, board ops, knew the music, knew how to play it. And that's what they did. And they even said when they went on the air, they didn't have, it was MRQ for like modern rock, but they said, this station, you tell us what you want it to be called. This is your radio station. And that was how it went from the beginning. All right, we got to go, don't we?
that's it.
All right, okay. All right.
Jay, thank you for joining, and we're going to have you back.
Good. Thank you.
We're going to definitely
love
have
to.
you back at sometime in the near future, and we have a lot of other people we want to talk to.
Yep.
We'll talk to Joe McCoy.
Well, tell Joe I said hello. He's one of my favorites.
Will do.
How do you think we got you? Are you kidding me, Jay? I said, how are we going to get Jay Clark? Get Joe McCoy. He'll get Jay Clark. Again, it comes down to, blackmail. No. Okay.
And the photos.
Oh, God. All right. Thanks a lot, Jay. Appreciate you always remembering your friends. And that's what it's all about. And you're a great friend. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
See you guys next time
On Radio Talk. We're going to talk about radio the next time.
Yeah.
Now I have to find my cursor.
Stop cursing. Oh, there you go.
There.